Hello, I am here today with author Nick Thacker, and let me tell you a little bit about Nick. Nick Thacker is the USA Today best-selling author of action-adventure thrillers and mysteries, including the Harvey Bennett thriller series. Often mentioned as a cross between Clive Cussler and James Rollins, his stories are written in a fast-paced, punchy style. He lives in Colorado Springs with his wife, two kids, and two dogs. Which, Nick, that leads me to my first question. Why are you lying?
Well, we technically own a home in Colorado Springs, so it's not really a lie. But I am currently in Honolulu, Hawaii, where we've lived for 7 months. Probably not going to be our long-term home, so I kept the Colorado Springs uh, uh, thing, whatever that words, whatever those are called, in my bio. Bio,
Well,
that's what it is.
welcome. I just had to hit you with that question right off to let you
Of
know this is
course.
going to be a hard-hitting interview. I will
No
pull no
softballs.
punches.
That's right.
So why don't you
I hope.
tell us a little bit about what you write and a little bit about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, probably because I wrote that bio, I think. It is, I try to write books that are very plot forward, with some good character development, but in that order. I started reading thrillers because I liked the plots. I liked what was happening, the machinations of stuff, and I wanted to put that in my books. They've been described as airport books or airplane books, as an insult, and I took that and ran with it because I love that. It's exactly what I'm trying to write, is books that you buy to get on the airplane because you need to be entertained for a few hours. Um, Not trying to, write the next great American novel. They're just fun. They're fast. There's a lot of neck shots and gunshots and things like that. But they're the kind of books that I want to read.
I don't take airport thriller as an insult either, because the way I look at it, is I'm an author too, and we're not curing cancer, but the
Right.
way I figure out my service to humanity is if I can make somebody forget about their crappy life for a few hours and dive into something fun, then I feel like I've done my job.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, at best, I want to make people think. So I put some science in there that's real, some history that's real. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to entertain people,
yeah.
have a good time.
So today we're going to talk about your favorite thriller. So what book are you want to talk about today?
Well, I can't remember which one I told you I was going to talk about, but so this may change. But I wanted to talk about a book called Amazonia by James Rollins.
Hmm.
It is just like what I just described. It's very plot forward, but there's some good characters in it as well. Definitely in the realm of what I would call an airport book, but it is just a rollicking good time set in the Amazon rainforest.
Can you give us like a little teaser or kind of a synopsis that doesn't spoil anything?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So the opening chapters or chapter is set in the Amazon. There's a man who stumbles out of the jungle and he's dying. He's got some kind of virus inside of him. And I can't remember if it's a church or something he ends up in, but there's a monk type person who helps him, tries to bring him back to life, fails. The guy dies. Um, but they take a picture of the man after he dies and try to figure out who he is. They send it out. And the man's son, I think his son or somebody related, somebody recognizes the man and says, I know who that is. That's a man from an expedition that entered the rainforest years ago, and no one's ever heard from them since. And they say, okay, so this starts to get, okay, we're going to go back into the rainforest, and as a reader, you're going to be pulled back down there to try to figure out what happened to this expedition. Here's the hook, and this is why I love this book. The person who recognizes the man in the picture says, that's really interesting. This man has two arms. And the guy's like, well, yeah, of course he does. And the guy says, well, when this man went into the rainforest 10 years ago, he only had one arm. Uh-huh. Right.
Huh.
So it's got a little bit of this. What happened in the rainforest? How did he heal his arm and grow an arm back, or whatever happened? And so that's the hook for the whole set, for the whole novel. They go down to the rainforest, new expedition to try to figure out somebody's son. I can't remember. I think his name is Sam, but is the main character trying to find his father, who was part of this expedition.
Hmm.
Not the man who was in the picture from the beginning, but just part of that expedition. So there's some of that father son. There's a little bit of a love interest. There's a little bit of the good guys, bad guys, people trying to find this thing or whatever happened that could grow limbs back, essentially. So it gets in a little bit of the science, a little bit of the mystical type element, but it's certainly not fantasy. It's certainly not in the realm of a Harry Potter type thing. very strongly in the action adventure thriller genre, and I love it. I've read it probably 3 times now.
Wow. That's it sounds like it gets to the action right away, which is something I can appreciate. If a book takes 6 chapters before you actually find out what it's supposed to be about, or
Absolutely.
before anything happens. So would you characterize it more as a character-based story or a plot-driven story?
Certainly plot driven. Just like when I described him, you could tell I didn't even really know which character was doing what or whose father or son. That's all important to the book, of course, but it's second, kind of takes backseat to the plot. And again, I have read it enough times to know some of the major plot things. I won't give any of them away, but there's just so much happening in this story that is really not based on the characters. It's not because of a character doing a certain thing. It's just a lot of action.
Can you tell us about the villain in the story without spoiling anything?
Not really. It's kind of hard to explain because the villain isn't who we think it is, which is always makes a good villain. Or hint what we think it is. And so it ends up, there's not a whole lot more I can say about it without giving some stuff away.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, you see that more in usually in mysteries where you don't know who the villain is until later on in the book, or the villain, reveals themselves. But it's definitely more common in thrillers where you know who the villain is from the outside,
Yes.
but from the outset. But it's not always that way, right?
Right. I guess what I mean is there is a bad antagonist facet to the book. That's just not the only element that is what I would call the villain, or even the main one, right? So there's the obvious part, but then there's a little bit more to it than that, which is great. Love it.
Would you describe this book as a page turner?
Absolutely, 100%.
What does it mean to be a page turner to you?
For me, I get about 2.5 minutes a day to read because I have kids, and so when I go to bed, that's the only thing I want to do ever is sleep. In order to get to sleep, I open my Kindle and I read. And so when I read a book, I consider a book a page turner when it's one that keeps me awake against my will. Mm-hmm. When it's one that I just can't, I got to go to the next chapter. And James Rowlands writes, I've read all of his books. He writes in a way, I try to emulate this in my own writing, where every chapter sort of ends on a question, a cliffhanger, and some, maybe not as big of a cliffhanger, but there's something pulling you on to the next chapter. There's really no resolution at the end of it. The resolution happens at the beginning of a chapter or the middle, and then another question is answered at the end, and it just pulls you in like that.
Is this book part of a series?
It's not, actually, and that's part of the reason I like it. James Rowlands writes the Sigma Force series, which is now up to 8 or 10 books, I think. But he did a few books early on that were just solo, just standalone. Mm-hmm. And Amazonia is one of them. So I don't know that he has plans to do a sequel or anything like that, or even if you could. And so I think for that reason, the book really stands on its own because it's just a full story. There's nothing, all the loose. It's so satisfying to read because all of the loose ends are closed. All the loops all the holes are closed. The open loops are closed by the end of the book, and so it makes it for a really sasatisfying read because there's no more story than that. Everything is done.
Interesting.
And these days, especially as you and I are both writing series that are going to be 1,000 books long. It makes more money, but it keeps readers engaged for a longer period of time. But because we have to sacrifice having fully closed loops at the end of all of our books. They have to leave some things open, even if it's just, hey, this character's not dead yet, so he can come back later, or she can come back later.
It seems like that's pretty common with thriller authors who, at least for traditionally published thriller authors, who early in their career they might have more standalones. Like most people, Lee Child is kind of an anomaly that he only ever writes Jack Reacher, and that's, as far as I know, that's the only thing he's ever written. Like his first book was the launching of his series, but you see more authors who they'll put out a couple of standalones before they start their series. Right.
And yeah, I mean, if you're Lee Child, keep doing what you're doing, right? It's just, I think most of us have to get our feet wet with something that's more standalone. I did the same thing with the first 3 books, and the 3rd book I wrote, The Enigma Strain, ended up being one that readers really liked, and so I was basically just asked to write more. And at that time, and this is probably why the Enigma strain has sold as well as it did. I think it was intended to be a standalone book.
Mm-hmm.
I just took the characters at the end of it and started for the next book.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've done that too, where something that was supposed to be a standalone turned out to be a series because people asked for it. So about Amazonia, what's the one thing you said this is your favorite thriller? So what's the one thing about it that makes it stand head and shoulders above all the other thriller books that you've read?
For me, it's this perfect blend of science, history, mystery and I mean mystery in like the what if, the what if question. I think the Amazon rainforest, just like the depths of the ocean or Antarctica, there's a few places left. There are only a few places left on Earth where I think there's some like some real mystery surrounding what's actually there. In the Amazon, I think there's a little bit more fictionalized mystery to it, of course, because for the most part we do know it's there. But there's this idea that, well, what if there's some kind of magical drug that can cure cancer down there? What if there's some kind of thing that could mysteriously regrow limbs, for example? And I think for me that was the perfect mix. Amazonia has the perfect mix of things that are real, the kind of terrors that they face. I won't give anything away, but there's pretty nasty creatures and bugs and all that in the Amazon rainforest that are actually there. And of course, the team that goes in there finds them all and gets eaten and all that by them. But then there's this idea of the what if, of wow, what if this is down there? We don't really know. And it's so hard to get an expedition down, even with today's technology, to get something down there. And it's not enough to take a bunch of guns and, Navy SEALs down there because we just don't have the knowledge of what's down there, what's awaiting us. I think that was the biggest draw for me was I wanted, my suspension of disbelief, kicked in. I wanted to believe that the stuff they encountered was real. And James Rowlands does a great job of making it seem like it could be real.
When you have an exotic location like that, it must add a lot to the excitement, a place that a lot of Americans at least haven't been to, because like part of the reason why James Bond is so exciting, I think, is because he's so international. If every James Bond novel took place in Des Moines, it probably wouldn't be nearly as interesting. And I'd have trouble believing that much exciting stuff happened in Des Moines, to be honest, if every James Bond novel. I've been to Des Moines,
and there's some exciting stuff, but it's definitely not James Bond level stuff. My parents are from there, so I definitely know. But with James Bond, another facet of that, another element is he's a gadget guy, right? He's got all these gadgets that we've never heard of. That, of course, they're fiction; they're not real, but they could be. And so the author Ian Fleming makes those seem so real that, of course, that would exist. Of course, he would have that. Of course, MI6 would be able to pull something off like that. And so, I think that's true also with the books that I like to read. I've always said to my people asking me about my ideas, I call it my formula. And of course, I put that in quotes because formula is a bad word. But my formula is put the book in an exotic location, right? But the reason it's in an exotic location is because there's a bad guy or group doing something in that exotic location because they're trying to hide what they're doing. Give them some technology that's not quite there yet. Like it's maybe a prototype today that's actually a prototype now, but they've actually figured it out. They've cracked it. They know what to do to make it real, and they want to, of course, take over the world with it. And then let the good guys go find them, go figure out how to get down there, and so they have to battle the elements, whatever's in that exotic location, and then the technology itself, not to mention all the bad guys. So that's been sort of my formula, and Amazonia fits that, to the T. It's got some of the technology, some of the modern guns and weaponry that they bring down there with them, thinking that's going to help them. It's got the real locale of the Amazon rainforest, and all the things and creatures that are nonfiction that are actually there. And then it's got a little bit of this, well, okay, that's not real science, but I see how you've made it real science. I see how that makes sense to me, And I'm not a scientist, so I'm sure if, someone's reading the book that, a book that I like, the Amazon or the Enigma strain, I put a bacteria inside of a virus. I don't know if we can do that or not, but I did enough research to know that it's smaller than the virus, so it fits in there or whatever, or maybe the other way around. the point is like it's enough science that it's like, okay, well, this is hopefully plausible enough that you can latch onto it and be like, okay, it's not just out of left field. That's better than just saying, well, I'm not going to give you any information about the virus or the bacteria. It just is, and just good luck, reader. You know.
Mm-hmm. So you said you've read basically all of James Rollins' books. What is there a common thread to all of them that makes you want to gobble up all his fiction?
Yeah, I think the common thread is similar, very similar to what I'll just admit it here. I pretty much model my thrillers after what James Rollins has done because again, I write what I like to read, and his stuff is what I like to read. I think if I were to nail down what his formula is, if you will, it's very similar. It's put the book in an exotic location, and the difference is I think he's causing the reader to ask the question, this seems like magic. The bad guy's doing something magical. The bad guy's doing something that's fantasy, that's not real. And then by the end of the book, he pulls the curtain back and you see it's just the guy in the Emerald City just pulling strings, right? It's these things that it's not fantasy at all. It's real. It's science. At best, science. At worst, it's just bad guys doing bad guy stuff, and we had some red herring to chase. All of his books kind of do that. And so now with the Sigma Force stuff, it does get a little convoluted because you've got all these characters and an ensemble cast going on with different people falling in love with different people. And so that's got to be a part of the story. And I get that. But the fun is still there. It's still driving the story forward where you've got, like an example is an opening. I think it was called the Judas Strain. It's book 4 in his Sigma Force. I'm looking at the brief synopsis on Wikipedia right now. I'm pretty sure it opens with this scene of a young couple in church taking communion together. And I think he or she doesn't take communion, doesn't eat the bread. But everybody who eats the bread, it gets electrocuted like 5 minutes later somehow. So that's kind of like, well, at first you think is this magic? Is it like some bread that's got some disease in it or some kind of weird thing? And then by the end of the book, you find out it's some technology that's being developed or something that they're, and I'm totally, messing up the storyline for that one. But that's the kind of stuff that he throws into his books. It's usually right at the beginning where it's like, wow, how did a guy grow his arm back in the rainforest, or somebody patched his arm out, whatever happened, that's not something we can do today in today's world. But the book takes you to a place still in modern times where that can happen or somehow, and you believe it.
And then so the trick in each book is that there's going to be, after you've read enough of them, there's going to be a logical explanation for it, but right. the fun is puzzling it out and not being able to figure it out and trying to think of what it could be till you eventually get to what it is. I get
Absolutely.
it. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's you. I mean, you've kind of broke it wide open for my own books too. I don't always do that very well, and I think that's when my books aren't as good as I think they could be. That's where I'm failing, is in the puzzle. I may have a really good hook. I think I usually have a pretty good hook, and then I usually have a decent enough answer at the end. But it's how do I make this not so obvious that we figured it out in chapter 3, and we're just reading 72 chapters because we like the guy or whatever.
So here's a general question. What is it that makes a thriller a thriller?
I'm thrilled to read it. I don't know. That's a good question. I think, like I've mentioned the word mystery a little bit, I think a thriller to me is a mystery, but unlike the mystery genre, it's a little bit more about the plot being the mystery rather than the whodunit, like who committed the crime. I think with a thriller, and I actually think there's an answer to this that Wikipedia probably has better than I do, but for me, it's when we kind of know who the bad guy is by, if not the inciting incident, then at least by the second act of a 4-act structure. We know who the bad guy, or at least the main antagonist that we want to be, the author wants to show us, is. So it's really not a matter of who did it, who killed the person, or who's going to kill the people, but it's really more of a, how are they going to do it? When are they going to do it? Why are they going to do it? How do we stop them from doing it? Or what are they going to do? And I think that's what a good thriller does. It weaves this big tapestry of, okay, there's a little bit of mystery, but the mystery isn't really who killed this person and how they do it. It's really, okay, well, what's going on down there? What's what's so special about that place or this thing or this science that the bad guys got, and what are they going to do with it? So it really is a lot more like a puzzle to me. Now, I haven't read a ton of mysteries, murder mystery type stuff, but I do know that the ones that I've read, it seems like thrillers are typically on a little bit of a larger scale. They're answering maybe a few more questions than a murder mystery, and that's probably just not true. But for me, that's what a thriller does. It invites you as the reader to try to puzzle it out with the author, but with the characters, like a murder mystery. But it's also going to bring in threads of more science and technology and things like that. I'm just going to stop talking because I feel like that's totally wrong, but I've always had a really hard time differentiating mystery and thriller. So I just say I write mystery thrillers.
Well, that's fine. That wasn't a quiz question. It was just it was an interpretive question. So your answer couldn't be wrong. I mean, it probably was kind of wrong, but
probably was wrong.
So, Nick, you've told us all about Amazonia by James Rollins. What book of yours do you want to tell the audience about today?
Well, I wrote a book called The Amazon Code, which features a guy who stumbles out of the jungle with a regrown arm. No, I'm just kidding. I already had
it's a great hook.
Model, so I just changed his name to Pam, and it is called The Amazon Code. Actually, I wrote a little. Is it preface, author's note, whatever you want to call it, before the book started, that it was always, when I started writing, it was always my dream to write something that I think could hold up to James Rollins' book Amazonia. And I don't have any impression that I did as well as James Rollins did, but it is a fun book, and it's fun because I used sort of his formula. I put something in the jungle that could be real, that we just don't know about. I put a ton of bad guys in there that want to kill the good guys who want to find the answer, and they both want to find what the technology is that can do this amazing thing. And I'll just tell you because it is the hook of the book. The opening 3 chapters are like a prologue in some ways. There's a researcher named Dr. Amanda Moron. She's down in Brazil at a research company that does neurological research, and they have been experimenting, and this is all real. This is from Michio Kaku's Physics of the Mind, Physics of the Future series. He's a nonfiction physicist kind of guy, right? So it all is real science. But Neurotech is the company that's doing this stuff in the book, and they've taken it to the next level, right? They've discovered how to put electrodes on the brain and record people's dreams when they're asleep. Video recordings of their dreams. And I try to explain how this is all accurate. This works. All you do is you start with mapping the brain when you have an electrode, and when you show somebody a grid of dots and this dot up here lights up, this area of the brain lights up. And so when you do that enough, you can kind of map the brain, and you add enough electrodes. And this is where we are with the science today. We don't have the ability to make them small enough that we can have enough, but eventually we could. And we can get it so precise that we know when this little thing lights up over here, it's this sort of image. So Neurotech in the book is doing that research, and they've got a pretty good video representation of dreams that they could record from people. The dreams are all kind of blurry. You can't really see, but you can see that, the example I give in the book is there's a man running through a house chasing a kid. It's his son, and they're happy, and you kind of get that idea. Maybe it's a birthday party, but it's really blurry. And then the man who's dreaming, it's all from his point of view, looks out the window, and across the street, there's another man that's all gold, completely covered in gold. And it's not blurry. It's totally crisp and clear, and it plain as day. And so at first they're like, what the hell is that? Like, they think, someone's been hacking their data. But then they start to realize that they've been testing other people, and all these people have the same golden man in their dream. And they're like, well, what the hell? How does that all happen? So they do some research. They find out that the people they're testing that have the golden man in their dream are all descended from a certain tribe in the Amazon rainforest. So that's what kicks off the book, right? They have to go find this tribe and figure out what technology or whatever it is that causes them all to have this golden man in their dreams.
Interesting.
So that was my homage to James Rollins there with The Amazon Code. It's the second book in the series.
That's Harvey Bennett book 2.
Book 2, yep.
I haven't read the Amazon Code, but I have read the Enigma Strain. And if Amazon Code is as good as the Enigma Strain, I'm sure I would enjoy it. So I did enjoy the Enigma Strain.
Well,
and,
thank you. Yeah.
I mean, I also wrote a book.
You also did, so you kind of had to read the Enigma Strain. I sort of forced you to do that.
Yeah. Anyway, that book is The Severed Pines, which is available on Amazon, and the Amazon Code is available on Amazon, and Amazonia is available on Amazon. I don't know if it's available on Amazon in the Amazon, because I don't know if there's an Amazon website in the Amazon, but there could be. I don't know.
Maybe.
The Amazon runs through several countries, right?
It does. Yeah, I mean, it's really more of a basin rather than just one river.
Right.
But it goes through a ton of little towns, and mostly Brazil, but yeah, Peru and a little bit of Venezuela maybe.
Okay. Well, Nick, I wanted to thank you for spending time to chat with me today. This has been really great, and that book, again, was The Amazon Code by Nick Thacker. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.